You were never supposed to hear this. The Vatican denies it. The diocese buried it. The locals, the few who remember, don't talk anymore. But in the winter of 1887, when frost turned to rot, a construction crew dug beneath the bones of a forgotten orphanage in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, and found 93 tiny wooden crosses. Each one marked with a child's name, a date, and silence. The ground had hidden them well, until one worker struck something that wasn't stone, but carved oak. Names scratched into the wood with urgency, like someone carving before death. And here's the part that still gets whispered in bars and old churches: Santa Eulalia was only open for 17 years. 93 children entered its doors. That's the exact number of crosses found beneath the dining hall. No official burials. No records of death. Just names, and a bell that rang at night. After the discovery, the church came. Not the local police. Not journalists. Priests in black cassocks with eyes that didn't blink. They took everything. Paid off the workers. Demolished the building in 1 week. And made them sign. You saw nothing. But history doesn't stay buried. Not forever. Letters surfaced. Diaries. A deathbed confession from a delivery boy. Testimonies too dark to ignore. You see, what happened at Santa Eulalia wasn't a tragedy. It was a ritual. And the church wasn't trying to save children. It was trying to purify them. Welcome to The Forgotten 93. A descent into the darkest chapter of American religious history, one that rewrites everything you thought you knew about faith, charity, and the cost of obedience. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. You've already stepped into it. And now, you're not going back. We begin in 1834. A town built on belief. A priest who preached obedience through suffering. And an orphanage whose walls were never meant to echo laughter, only silence. Are you ready to hear what they buried? Good. Because what you're about to learn, no man forgets. Millbrook, Pennsylvania, 1834. A small Protestant town clinging to the edge of civilization, where winters came early, and faith came hard. When Father Heinrich Kellerman arrived, he wasn't just another Catholic priest. He was a man on a mission, Bavarian-born, eyes like sharpened glass, and sermons soaked in the fire of medieval doctrine. He spoke of redemption through pain, obedience through silence. But the townspeople didn't question him. Not then. Because they were desperate. Children wandered the streets, orphaned by cholera, accidents, and the industrial age's unrelenting appetite. And Kellerman offered a solution. A beacon, he called it. Santa Eulalia Orphanage. Built from the bones of a failed textile merchant's mansion, transformed by Kellerman's hand and funded by the pockets of distant Catholic elites. A bell tower rose above it, imported from Munich, cast with a single phrase in Latin, Laudate Dominum. Praise the Lord. But beneath the surface, something else stirred. Sister Margaret Clare, an Irish nun with calloused hands and eyes that never smiled, was chosen to lead the orphanage. She brought with her 2 others, younger, quieter, eager to serve. And on June 15, 1834, the doors opened. Children came, broken, lost, desperate. And the town rejoiced. But within weeks, the signs began. The children did not play. They did not laugh. They moved like shadows, hands folded, lips sealed. The bell rang not just for prayer, it rang at midnight, at 3 a.m., during storms, and on days with no name. The local physician, Dr. Thomas Whitmore, found it strange. No child ever needed care. Not a single call. Not a single fever or scraped knee. And when he asked why, Kellerman smiled and said, God protects those he purifies. The townspeople whispered, of pale faces at windows, of chants in the wind, of the way the air changed when you passed the wrought iron gate. But they said nothing. Because they wanted to believe. They needed to believe that Santa Eulalia was doing God's work. That Father Kellerman was a savior. They didn't realize he was building a sanctum. Not for salvation, but sacrifice. And the deeper he went, the more the children disappeared into something no prayer could reach. Keep listening. You've only scratched the surface. It started with the sound, that bell. Not the joyful ring of church mornings or the solemn toll of a funeral. No, this was different. Rhythmic. Relentless. Strategic. A weapon disguised as worship. The town clock struck midnight, and the bell of Santa Eulalia answered back, loud, metallic, shaking the windows of nearby homes. Then again at 3 a.m. And again at dawn. The pattern was too precise to be random. Dr. Whitmore knew this. He had studied the effects of sleep deprivation in medical school. He understood what happened to the mind when it couldn't rest. Hallucinations. Disorientation. Complete surrender. And who suffers most from constant disruption? Children. Especially those already weakened by grief and starvation. What Kellerman created wasn't an orphanage. It was a psychological crucible. A place to erase identity and reforge obedience. And Sister Margaret Clare was its high priestess. Her eyes had stopped blinking weeks in. Witnesses say she moved like someone who hadn't slept in months. Her voice never rose, but it didn't need to. One glance from her, and children froze like animals caught in moonlight. Deliveries arrived at odd hours. Food quantities shrank. Records didn't match. Timothy Fletcher, the delivery boy, noticed first. Some weeks he saw 20 children. The next, 10. Then 7. And yet, no one ever left through the gate. When he asked Sister Bernardet, she simply said, "The Lord giveth. The Lord taketh away." But that wasn't scripture. That was warning. Then came the bundles. Small white cloths carried through the halls like sacred relics. They moved. They cried. And no one ever saw them again. One night, Timothy opened the front door instead of the back. It was frozen shut. Inside, he heard Latin. Crying. Then silence. What he saw in the chapel changed him forever, a ritual. Children kneeling. A moving bundle in Sister Clare's arms. A voice that didn't sound like hers whispering through candlelight. He ran. But not fast enough. Sister Bernardet caught him. Made him swear. On his mother's grave. What you saw is holy. But it is not for the common man. That's when it became clear, this wasn't about saving children. This was about using them. And no one, not God, not country, not even conscience, was going to stop it. Because once you hear the bell, it's already too late. By spring of 1835, the silence was louder than the bell. The children of Santa Eulalia no longer smiled through windows. They no longer appeared at all. But when they did, glimpsed in passing by a merchant or a passerby, they looked thinner, hollowed. Eyes too large for their faces. Skin the color of ash. Dr. Whitmore began writing everything down. He kept a journal locked in his study. "Something unnatural is happening," he wrote. "Something not born of disease, but of doctrine." He tried to get inside the orphanage under the pretense of medical care. But Kellerman declined, politely. Again. "Sister Clare is sufficient," he said. "They are not sick. They are being shaped." Those words, being shaped, stuck in Whitmore's mind. Then came Anna Dietrich. 8 years old. Orphaned by cholera. Left in Sister Clare's care by her only remaining aunt. A month later, the aunt returned. And was told Anna had been adopted. Gone. No address. No name. Just gone. The aunt screamed. demanded answers, but was dragged from the building by two men who said they were protectors of the church. She left bruised, shaken, but not silent. She wrote letters, to Philadelphia, to Rome. None were answered. And then the town began to change. Slowly, subtly. People started avoiding the orphanage. The sound of the bell now filled them with dread. Shadows behind candlelit windows moved in patterns too precise to be casual. At night, the nuns walked the grounds barefoot, murmuring Latin into the wind, their habits soaked through with melted snow. And always, always, the children obeyed. Even when they were in pain. Even when they were dying. You see, Kellerman believed in purification, not just of the soul, but of bloodline. A fusion of medieval theology and Bavarian mysticism. He wrote of a new generation. Children forged in silence. In obedience. In ritual. But to create them, the old had to be broken. Bent. Sacrificed. Santa Eulalia was not a sanctuary. It was a furnace. A machine designed to burn away weakness. And the town, for all its suspicions, remained complicit in its silence. Because truth costs something. And belief is easier than action. But make no mistake, the cost had already been paid. In tiny bones. In unmarked graves. In 93 names carved into wood, not stone. And if you're still listening, you're not just hearing this history, you're absorbing it. Let it sink deeper. Let it reshape you. This is only the beginning. The town wanted to forget, but the land wouldn't let them. Rainwater pooled where the bell tower once cast its shadow, and the earth beneath the orphanage grew soft, like something beneath was rotting. But still, the church held its grip. Kellerman began preaching in secret. Not to the townspeople, to the children. His sermons were no longer about God's mercy. They were about sacrifice. About divine order. About the weight of purity. He claimed that the world outside was diseased, corrupt, chaotic, doomed. That only through absolute obedience could the soul survive. But it was more than theology. He was creating an echo chamber of control. Isolation. Ritual. Pain. Reward. Control. Repeat. Those who questioned were removed. Those who obeyed were reshaped. Sister Catherine, the youngest of the nuns, began to unravel. Witnesses saw her muttering to herself in the cemetery behind the orphanage. She scratched symbols into the snow with her bare fingers. Screamed at birds. Dug holes in the frozen ground and whispered into them. Something had broken inside her. One night, she ran into town, barefoot and bleeding, screaming, "They won't stay down. They're still calling." The bell didn't silence them. She was restrained. Taken in by Dr. Whitmore. He tried to question her, but all she did was draw, pages filled with childlike figures, all faceless, all bleeding from the eyes. Then came the fire. In late 1836, a wing of the orphanage caught flame in the dead of night. Townspeople ran to help, but the gates were locked. They pounded, screamed, but no one opened. The fire burned out before dawn. The nuns claimed it was a kitchen accident. But no smoke was ever seen. No children were treated. And when Whitmore returned the next day, the area that had burned was already boarded up. Fresh wood. Fresh nails. But something still smelled charred. That's when he made his decision. If the church wouldn't act, he would. But he needed proof. Hard evidence. Something undeniable. Something that couldn't be confiscated or buried. And so, he began his own investigation. Quiet. Careful. Dangerous. You don't just challenge the church. Not in 1836. Not in America. And not when its foundation is soaked in secrets. But he was willing. Because someone had to speak for the children who no longer could. And if you're still here, so are you. You've already crossed the threshold. And you need to decide, are you just a listener, or a witness? Dr. Whitmore started with what he could control, the dead. Over the next year, he quietly exhumed 3 graves in the town cemetery belonging to children adopted from Santa Eulalia. No records of their deaths. No public funerals. Just quiet burials, arranged by the church. What he found disturbed him beyond science. The bones were brittle. Malnourished. 2 skulls showed signs of repeated blunt trauma. One had markings, deliberate, symmetrical carvings etched into the bone. Ritual symbols. He cross-referenced them with his old medical books, but found nothing. So he went further, into older texts. Occult writings. Forbidden Catholic doctrines long excommunicated from the Church. And there it was, votum silenti. The vow of silence. An outlawed practice believed to purify the soul through pain, starvation, and speech deprivation. A method once used on heretical children during the Spanish Inquisition. And Father Kellerman was resurrecting it, right here, in Pennsylvania. Whitmore's hands trembled as he wrote. This was no longer medicine. This was spiritual warfare. He sent letters to state authorities, to bishops in New York and Baltimore, even to Rome. No reply. He was met only with silence, and surveillance. He noticed men following him after Massachusetts. His mail arrived opened. One night, a black candle was left burning on his doorstep, an old Catholic warning, stop digging. But he didn't stop. And neither should you. Because this is where most people turn away. Where the knowledge gets too dark, too heavy. But not you. You're still here, and that means you were meant to hear this. To remember what others were forced to forget. If you believe that truth should never be buried, comment this phrase below twice, the bell never sleeps. Type it exactly like that. Twice. That's how we lock this in. That's how we tell the algorithm, and the world, that we're done pretending. No more silence. No more obedience. No more forgetting the forgotten 93. You're not just watching history unfold. You're becoming part of it. And as we move forward, deeper into the chamber of secrets that was Santa Eulalia, understand this, the church didn't fail those children. It offered them. What comes next will make you question every cathedral you've ever stepped into. Keep going. Don't look away now. By 1837, Santa Eulalia was no longer just an orphanage, it had become a fortress. A place sealed off not by walls, but by fear. The children inside no longer had names that anyone remembered. They were referred to in numbers. Number 17 had a limp. Number 41 didn't speak. Number 62 bled too easily. The nuns moved them like chess pieces, instructing them with hand signals, feeding them in absolute silence. Their eyes were vacant, their limbs too thin. One merchant described them as wax figures that breathed. And still, the bell tolled. Not for prayers, but for control, a sound so constant that townspeople began sleeping with rags stuffed in their windows. The priest claimed it was the sound of devotion. Dr. Whitmore knew better. It was the sound of indoctrination. The sound of sleep deprivation. Of compliance. Of breaking the will. And then, one child escaped. Just one. A boy of about 9, unnamed, unclaimed. He was found by a hunter 3 miles outside of Millbrook, hiding in the hollow of a tree, shaking and whispering in broken Latin. He had whip marks across his back and one of his ears was missing. His mouth had been sewn shut with black thread, clumsily, crudely. But his eyes screamed everything. The hunter took him to Whitmore. The boy couldn't speak, but he could write. What he wrote would burn itself into Whitmore's mind forever. The bell is not for God. It's to keep the voices away. That single sentence turned everything. Whitmore now knew, the rituals weren't about worship. They were about containment. Kellerman wasn't saving souls. He was binding something. Controlling it, or trying to. And the children weren't just victims. They were vessels. The boy died that night. Infection, trauma, fear, no one could say for sure. He was buried in an unmarked grave. And within 48 hours, 2 representatives from the diocese arrived in Millbrook. They demanded all of Whitmore's notes. He refused. That same night, his home was broken into. His journals stolen. His dog found strangled. And yet, somehow, he kept going. He had one copy hidden. He had names. He had drawings. He had truth. The town tried to pretend the child had never existed. But Whitmore wrote it all down. And you're hearing it now, because someone risked everything to preserve it. Understand, this isn't history. It's a warning. The bell still rings. And it's closer than you think. The closer Whitmore got to the truth, the more the town twisted around him. Friends stopped visiting. Parishioners looked through him like he'd already died. Even his own assistant, a loyal young man named Elias, quit without a word, left town, left his books, left everything. And yet, the bell kept ringing. It echoed through the hills even on windless nights, even when the tower was empty. By now, Whitmore's theory had evolved from theology to terror. He no longer believed Kellerman was acting alone. He believed the church knew. That what happened in Santa Eulalia was not a rogue experiment in devotion, but a sanctioned ritual. An echo of something far older than Christianity, something that wore the cross like a mask. He revisited Kellerman's journals, the ones written in Latin, the ones he had translated by candlelight. Phrases stood out now, sharp with meaning: custodia vocis, the keeper of the voice; oblatio corporum, the offering of bodies; non moriuntur, resurrected, they do not die, they return. This wasn't doctrine. It was incantation. The children were not being purified. They were being prepared. For what? He still didn't know. But the signs were everywhere. In the way the trees near the orphanage stopped growing. In how animals refused to cross the property. In how time itself felt slower near the building, like reality bent inward. Whitmore spoke to a visiting Jesuit priest, Father Lucien Moreau, who had spent years in South America studying forgotten Catholic sections. Moreau listened in silence, then said one thing: "You're not investigating a crime. You're trespassing on a covenant." That night, Whitmore found a crucifix nailed to his door. But not upright, upside down, inverted, burned at the ends. And behind it, scratched into the wood in childlike script: "They're still here." He didn't sleep. He stopped sleeping. Because every time he closed his eyes, he heard the bell. Even miles away. Even after he plugged his ears. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was a presence. If you're still listening, you're not just hearing a story. You're being pulled into the same vortex Whitmore fell into. And soon, you'll have to choose: turn away like the townspeople did, or descend further. Because Section 9 will reveal why the children were taken. And who came to collect them. This is no longer about religion. This is about power, ancient, systemic, and still watching. The true horror of Santa Eulalia unfolded not in the isolation of an orphanage, but in the dark covenant between power and sacrifice. For as Whitmore pieced together his stolen fragments of truth, a pattern emerged, a tapestry of secrets woven from the fabric of ancient regimes and forgotten rites. It became evident that the children were not merely sacrificed to cleanse sin or to offer a twisted form of salvation. They were chosen as conduits, vessels through which hidden forces could be summoned. Whispers in shadowed corridors spoke of an order that transcended mortal authority, a cabal of preachers and scholars who believed that only by binding innocent souls could the church achieve an unassailable grip on the metaphysical realm. In hushed tones, those who dared speak of it mentioned a title given to the orchestrators, Custodes Umbri, the keepers of shadows, whose lineage could be traced back to medieval purges and dark pacts. They were the unseen hand that guided not only the fate of the orphanage, but the destiny of entire communities. Kellerman was a willing acolyte, channeling ancient invocations that turned prayers into incantations. The altered rhythms of the bell were not random tolls but carefully modulated signals designed to thin the barrier between the living and the cursed. A symbolic cascade of events, and of souls, set in motion cycles of psychological terror that defied time. As Whitmore deciphered coded references hidden in archaic texts and secret missives, it dawned on him that each missing child was a stepping stone to a darker, more insidious awakening. The orphanage, cloaked under the guise of divine compassion, was in fact the epicenter of an experimental rite, the alchemy of despair, a transmutation of human fragility into a currency for control. And with every toll of that infernal bell, the Custodes Umbri gathered strength, expanding their influence beyond Millbrook to every hushed sanctum of power. The revelation was stark. This was not isolated madness, but a carefully orchestrated system, a web of manipulation reaching from small-town America to the vaults of the sacred. The bell, the children, and the blood-soaked rituals, each element was a piece of a forbidden puzzle meant to reshape the very soul of society. In that moment, it became clear that the force behind Santa Eulalia was less a matter of misguided charity and more an ancient, relentless hunger for control, a dark legacy that would endure as long as there were those willing to heed its call. By early 1838, Whitmore knew he was no longer alone in his investigation, but not in the way he hoped. He began noticing subtle signs of surveillance, footprints outside his window after snowfall, strange reflections in his mirror at night, letters tampered with, and once, most chilling of all, a rosary left dangling from the handle of his teacup. It was not a warning. It was a promise. The deeper he went, the more he realized that the church was not trying to bury Santa Eulalia's truth. It was protecting it, preserving it, guarding it like a sacred relic. Because the system didn't end with the orphanage. It replicated, rebranded, refined. Kellerman's journals hinted at sister sites, programs disguised as charity schools, convents, mental asylums. All operating under one doctrine, obedience through spiritual fragmentation. Break the child. Bind the soul. Use the body. Replace it with doctrine. This was industrialized control disguised as religious salvation. And the orphans? They weren't just offerings, they were templates. Psychological experiments in fear, silence, dependency. They thought they could contain it. That if they closed the gates, burned the records, and scattered the ashes of Santa Eulalia, the darkness would vanish. But what they had awakened was not bound by walls or rituals. It had roots, deep, spiritual roots, grown from generations of blind obedience, harvested through the suffering of 93 children. And in the final weeks of the orphanage, that darkness stopped hiding. The children began to speak in unison, not in English, not even in Latin, but in a dead dialect older than Rome, one that caused nosebleeds in anyone who listened too long. Sisters were found wandering the halls at night, clawing at their eyes, whispering prayers backward. Father Kellerman locked himself in the bell tower for 3 days, ringing the bell continuously, until his voice was gone and his hands were raw. Witnesses say the final sermon he gave was not in his voice, it was higher, fractured, and wept between syllables. And then came the fire. A blaze that started in the chapel and spread with unnatural speed. The townspeople stood outside, too afraid to intervene, watching the flames rise in the shape of a cross inverted against the night sky. Screams were heard, but not just human. Something else. Something that moved through the smoke like it had waited centuries to be released. The fire brigade arrived too late. By dawn, nothing remained but the scorched foundation. And yet, not a single child's body was found. Not one bone. Not one trace. The only thing recovered was the bronze bell. Unmelted. Uncracked. Still inscribed with laudate Dominum. Praise the Lord. But the sound it made when struck was no longer pure. It echoed with something twisted, like a scream caught inside metal. The diocese declared it an accident. The church buried the site under a new building, a school, ironically. But Whitmore never believed it was over. He swore he still saw children near the ruins. Pale ones. Watching. He moved away soon after. But the bell followed him. He heard it in hotel rooms, train cars, even in his dreams. In his final letter, he wrote, "The forgotten 93 are not lost. They are becoming." What they're becoming, he never lived to describe. But in the last section, you'll understand. Because there's one secret left, and it has everything to do with you. You've come this far. That means you felt it, the pull, the pressure, the cold truth crawling under your skin. This wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. A message written in shadow. The final revelation is this: Santa Eulalia never ended. The building burned, yes. The records were erased. But the system, the pattern, continued. In foster homes with locked doors. In reform schools with no oversight. In churches where silence was bought with gold and fear. The forgotten 93 were only the first phase. And you were always meant to hear their echo. Because you live in their aftermath. Look around you. Rituals disguised as systems. Authority justified by fear. Institutions that take your energy, your focus, your soul, and call it obedience. You think this is just history? Then why do you still hear the bell? Why do you feel its pressure in the middle of the night, that unease when a child vanishes and no one looks? That shiver when you walk past a place meant to heal, but smells faintly of despair? That's the system humming beneath the surface. It's never gone. Just refined. Santa Eulalia was a blueprint, and now the whole world is the building. The 93 were not victims. They were keys. And you're standing at the door they unlocked. The truth is that the keepers of shadows still operate. Not as priests anymore, but as executives, influencers, educators, media architects. The bell still rings, but now it's digital. It rings in your feed. In your schedule. In your silence. And every time you ignore a truth that feels too dark to face, it tolls again. If you feel a burning in your gut right now, that's not fear. That's recognition. You are not just a listener. You're a witness. And once you witness, you can't unknow. So if you're ready to reject the illusion and reclaim your mind from the keepers, write this in the comments twice, not once, but twice, to solidify it into the algorithm and into yourself. The bell rings no more. The bell rings no more. Type it, claim it, and never forget this. They hoped you'd never hear this story, but now you have, now you know, and now, you choose. Bell, like this video if you made it this far. Loudspeaker, share it with someone who needs to wake up. Candle, and remember, silence is how they win. Speaking truth is how we break the bell.